Welcome to the ASW community. I'm really excited to be here. My name's Saleema Vellani, and we'll be covering a lot today on how to really leverage LinkedIn to grow your platform. So whether you're a business owner or you're an entrepreneur or you're a professional and you're trying to really build your community online or build a virtual presence, LinkedIn is the best place to do that, especially if you're building a business. So you're eventually wanting to have a business, LinkedIn is the best place for that. It goes beyond just networking. And so we're going to dive into that today. We have a lot of people attending. So if you can just start putting into the chat where you're from, we'd be excited to see where everyone's coming from since we're a global community. Awesome. We have about 49 people so far. And let's see, in the chat, we have Switzerland, Paris, Germany, Vienna, Athens, New York, Switzerland, Paris. Lots of people from around the world. Canada, awesome. I'm also Canadian. Great. So let's get started. We have a lot to cover. Before we do so, I just wanted to let you know that as I'm focused here on delivering the content, I do have one of my team members, Christian Castro, who is in Bogota, Colombia, and he will be helping out with the chat and also helping with the Q&A. I'm going to be taking all the questions and answers, doing all the questions and answers at the end of the webinar. So I'm going to take about 40 minutes to get through the content. So if you do have questions, if you can just put them into the Q&A on Zoom in the Q&A feature, that way I can compile them all, we'll answer them all towards the end. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Saleema Vellani and I'm based in Washington, DC, and I'm originally from Toronto, Canada, so I'm Canadian. I'm the founder and CEO of Ripple Impact, where we help entrepreneurs increase their influence and impact by helping them grow their platforms and their businesses. I'm also the author of the forthcoming book. It'll be published in January. It's called Innovation Starts with I, and I also teach design thinking at Johns Hopkins University. So there's like these four components of me. I really love teaching, and there's this part of me that is really passionate about entrepreneurship and helping entrepreneurs succeed. One of my goals in life is to reduce the failure rate of entrepreneurs. And I'm also very passionate about helping amplify amazing organizations like the one that I'm chairing a conference for in Brussels, Armio, as well as doing some really cool work with the World Bank on how to really solve food insecurity in developing countries, especially in Africa, farming and hydroponics and all kinds of cool innovative solutions. One thing I wanted to disclose is that I'm not a LinkedIn trainer, nothing of the sort. I'm really busy with the work that I do, and I'm not affiliated with LinkedIn in any way. It's actually when COVID happened, a lot of people started reaching out to me, asking me, hey, can you help me with my marketing strategy? How did you build your audience on LinkedIn? And I got a lot of requests on LinkedIn. So when the pandemic happened, I started sharing a lot of the tips, a lot of what I do behind the scenes with my team on LinkedIn. So that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. As many of you know, LinkedIn is one of the hottest platforms right now. It's actually the hottest social platform with the highest return on investment for business owners, professionals, and content creators, if used well. It's different than Instagram and Twitter and all the other platforms. Facebook, a lot of them had their high times and years ago, and then LinkedIn has really just taken off very recently because it has. You don't have to deal with like using ads. You don't have to deal with anything. You can just have a really good profile and engage really well. And LinkedIn does a lot of the work for you. So we're going to be looking at that today. The only financial cost, it's a free platform. The only financial cost is if you have a premium account, then there is a cost to that. If you're going to use Sales Navigator, we're not going to go deep into all of that, but there are some benefits of using the premium. And it's important to really think about what's your why when it comes to using LinkedIn, because you have to know what your intention is. And for me personally, I really started using it seriously when I decided I wanted to write a book. This was in early January of 2019. And I was like, you know what? My editor told me, Saleema, if you don't have a platform, if you don't have an audience and nobody knows who you are, your book is not going to be successful and you're going to have to rely on other influencers to get your book out there. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like I have to have a platform, even though I was very much behind the scenes most of my life as a serial entrepreneur. I was very, very much behind the scenes. I wanted to help other people shine. And I realized I needed to get out there. And so, we're living in this world where we really we have these different personas. And for me, I didn't have an online persona and I didn't have a personal brand. And so I decided, it was time for me to get out there, and LinkedIn was the platform for that. And since that happened, it's interesting because there's a lot of other people similar to me where you have different aspects of yourself. I call myself, and many of us here today, if you're an entrepreneur, chances are you're probably a hybridpreneur, where you're probably doing multiple things. You're probably doing things that you're passionate about. You're doing something to give back to the community. You're doing something where you can make your money. You're doing something where you can grow and learn in communities like ASW. And so it's just really important to know, first of all, what's your intention and who's this persona? Who are you? Who do you want to be on this platform? Because it's important to reposition ourselves. And this is what you can really do with LinkedIn, is really position yourself where you want to be, and not necessarily where you are exactly right now or where you've been in the past. LinkedIn was very much about being a resume or like an online CV, which it's really not. It's really like a platform. It's a community. It's where you can have your community, and without having necessarily even a group, it's really like your profile and how you engage, because we're living in a world where people just want instant information. People are scrolling through news feeds. LinkedIn gives notifications. And so your profile is really king, and you have to build your community. And you shouldn't waste time, investing in company pages unless you have a company that has a lot of followers. Generally, LinkedIn will prioritize, personal profiles. And so that's where your focus should be, is really your personal profile. For me, when I started using LinkedIn, it became my most marketable profile. It got so much more traction than my website, than my Instagram, than Twitter, than all the other things out there. And because it does a lot of the work for you, you don't have to deal with constantly updating things and whatever. All you have to do is have a strategy, which I'm going to share some really great content around how to develop a strategy today with you. But we're living in this world where we have to really reduce the steps for people to take action. So think of your LinkedIn as a profile, as a landing page where people have different ways to take action. So what action do you want them to take? For me, once I really worked on my LinkedIn, it increased my following by several thousand. It got me a lot of speaking engagements. It got me on a lot of podcasts, on radio shows. I got a conference chair position, and it really brings in 95% of our business. So without LinkedIn, my business would be dead. And that's why I'm saying that right now, especially in this virtual world, it's important to have your LinkedIn set up in such a way, even if you don't have a business right now, but maybe you want to have a business 10 or 15 years from now, or whatever it is. Right now, LinkedIn is really hot and it works really well. And until they change the algorithm, or the next big thing comes, I really, really advise that you strongly use LinkedIn to your advantage. And that being said, LinkedIn is really a place, it's a platform where there's conversations. And so, there's conversations, as you can see, when people post things, and there's comments, there's, conversations that happen in the messages, one-on-one, there's in-mail if you're a premium user. And it's also a community, like I mentioned earlier. So as much as it's not necessarily a group or a platform, and even though the groups are not as popular as they used to be on LinkedIn, a lot just happens in terms of, when you share something or you see in your newsfeed, a lot of conversations are happening. And it's a really cool way to build community. It's also, for me, I like to call it an idea incubator, because it's a great place to test ideas or test content. So for my book, it was great for me to test. I use it all the time to test concepts, to test frameworks, to test stories and see how people are responding. So it's a really great place to build a beta community if you're launching a startup, or you're trying to pivot, or you're trying to figure out how people perceive you. It's a really great way to understand how people are reacting to what you're putting out there. I also think it's really important to know what your goals are. So like I said, for me, it was really about building a platform as I was getting ready to launch my book. There's different reasons. Like for me, yeah, the book, but it was also like, how do I really, build really authentic, meaningful business connections? And so there's a lot of different reasons. There's all kinds of reasons people have. You don't have to have just one goal, but for most people, it's either to reposition or rebrand yourself, which is a great way, because remember that oftentimes our weak ties are actually often stronger than our stronger ties, because it's the way people, when they meet you, or the way they see you when you show up, before they, if they've never seen you before, if they never knew about you before, they're going to see how you show up on LinkedIn as you are now. And that virtual presence is really important. And so it's your opportunity to rebrand yourself as you go beyond your sphere of influence. It's also a great way to build credibility. So it's a really, really cool way to, show, what you have. It's a social proof in a way to show, especially when you post really, really good content, you see people commenting. You don't have to deal with, there's a lot of spam. Yes, there is. but it's really great if you are a content creator, because it's an opportunity for you if you have, for example, you've published something on Forbes, or you have something you want to share, an achievement. And it's also a great place to really share who you are. And that's another thing it's turning, we'll talk about that later, how it's becoming a place for people to really show their behind the scenes and show their authenticity. And it's also, you know, a great place to get clients. And so that's something that, you know, a lot of people don't take advantage of. Is Sales Navigator is a great tool if you do have premium. And LinkedIn is a great place to get business. As I mentioned, that's where we get 95% of our business. It's also great for getting speaking or media opportunities, you know, for forging partnerships, for networking with other people. So it's important to figure out what's your why. And I'm going to now just go into a snapshot on how LinkedIn has changed. And so going over some of the 2020 trends, because it used to be very much, sorry, I can go back a bit. It was very much about, you know, the classic get rich, get richer loop. And people were, you know, it was really about imagining dollars swap for likes. It was about social kudos, and the average users like you and I were very much, you know, less likely to get interactions, and we were less motivated to post. It was very much about having our online CV. But now in 2019, the LinkedIn algorithm changed. And so it, you know, if you didn't take advantage in the last year and a half, it's getting harder now. But in the last year and a half, it was relatively easy to get views. And, you know, it was easy. One time I went to Amazon to give a talk, and I posted a picture in Seattle with Amazon. And it was amazing to just see like just 20,000 people viewed it within the first day. And it was pretty amazing. It's getting harder. You know, there were times when I think in 2019 where videos were prioritized. Now it's getting harder. They're looking for really good quality media. But basically it was, you just have to stay in touch with what's going on with the trends with the algorithm, because they're constantly changing that. And so right now the LinkedIn algorithm has 3 primary goals. So it's to share relevant content. So content that's really relevant to what's going on in the world, relevant to what people are going through. They're also all about promoting engagement. And so they want people to engage with the content. And so they're trying to keep people on the LinkedIn platform. So if you try to post things that are going to take people off the platform, we're going to talk about that later. There's going to be some type of penalization where they won't prioritize your post being seen in the newsfeed. And it's really all about fostering interaction with personal connections. So maybe if you've been on LinkedIn for a few years, you probably remember that a couple of years ago, you would see a lot of people like your posts that, you know, weren't actually, you know, that aren't actually in your sphere of influence, or that maybe were your second or third connections. But now you don't really get that. You mostly get people that are your first connections that will like your content, because they're trying to get people that are, you know, they're trying to get people that engage more with their own communities versus just trying to expand and have sort of less meaningful connections with a broader community. They're trying to help people deepen their connections with their current community. And so in LinkedIn, they call this people, you know, talking about the things you care about. So they want real conversations on LinkedIn. They want, from LinkedIn, they say genuine conversation around real experiences spark better and deeper conversation. And better conversation in turn leads to stronger community and connection. So think about LinkedIn turning into the next Facebook. That's what, you know, they copy a lot of what Facebook, the good things about Facebook, and they try to adopting things like LinkedIn groups and certain things, and, you know, articles and all these different aspects. But ultimately, think about it like your Facebook profile, and but ultimately a more professional version of it. And it's now changing as people are now sharing more and more of themselves. And it's less about just accomplishments. It's also about our failures. It's about who we really are. And they're also trying to move people away from just user-generated content that's created by professionals and, you know, high-profile individuals. There is this LinkedIn influencer program. They're actually trying to get people as well, you know, like there's LinkedIn Learning. There's so many different types of profiles out there, but they're really trying to have just average people have really good content. They're not just trying to promote their influencers. They're not just trying to promote all the famous people out there. And that's the beauty, that it's really powerful to be on LinkedIn right now. So you might be asking, how do I actually leverage my LinkedIn network to meet my business goals? Oftentimes people jump into sales too quickly without actually following the strategies that I'm giving you. And you probably know, you've probably gotten a few, if not many, spammy messages from people you don't know. There's a lot of bots out there today, and just a lot of people spamming on LinkedIn, especially on those private messages. And it's getting a bit annoying, and especially now we're all at home, and it's a bit irritating to get all those messages, but it does still work. A lot of people don't believe that you can have really meaningful conversations on LinkedIn. The goal is to start the conversations on LinkedIn and take them off LinkedIn. And to do that, you know, there's 3 really, really important parts. So first of all, you need to have a kick-ass profile. I like to say a really, really good profile. And I have a whole course on LinkedIn that we have for our clients, since we work with a lot of entrepreneurs that are trying to reposition themselves. And so if you're a business owner, you really have to think about your profile as a landing page that has specific items that will nudge people to take some sort of action. So there should be calls to actions throughout your profile, which is a landing page essentially of who you are. And so you really want to think about, you know, who you want to be on your LinkedIn page. Who's this persona that you want to portray? Who's the audience, which we're going to go into in a second. You also want to have epic content, and it's better to have, this is what we're going to focus on today. It's better to have less content and really good content than just be posting stuff. A lot of people are thinking more content is better, but today we're in this, you know, people are really trying to cut through all this noise, especially since we're all virtual right now. And so it's important to be authentic and have very good content that's valuable for your community. Another thing that's really important is to build real relationships. As I mentioned, that's you know, how you can really leverage LinkedIn, is to build real relationships. And so as you see people engaging on your posts, or you know, there's different ways, there's different strategies you can use, which we'll go into, but ultimately you want to be building real relationships and move those conversations off of LinkedIn. And before you start really doing anything, you have to define your audience. And LinkedIn is different than the other platforms because LinkedIn has both your primary audience and your secondary audience. Your primary audience are the people that, you know, you feel most called to, the people that you want to impact or see a transformation in. For me, it's the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the idealists, people that are trying to make an impact and they're overwhelmed, or they're solopreneurs. They're trying to figure out, how do I become more profitable? How do I grow my team? How do I, you know, make my mark in the world, and so grow my name? And so that's my primary audience. My secondary audience are the people that, you know, they are either those people's employer. My primary audience is employers, or the communities that they're part of, or their organizations that book me for speaking engagements, or that buy books, or, you know, they're more interested in this other persona of me, of, you know, what I do in terms of what I talk about, what I'm interested in, all that sort of stuff. So there's these different audiences, and you really have to understand who's your primary audience and who's your secondary audience, because when you distinguish that, you realize that, you know, LinkedIn is different than the other platforms like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, where people are more drawn just to, you know, they might just be your primary audience, but your secondary audience is often the audience that you do business with, that hires you. If you think about it, how many people actually hire, unless you have a product or you're a retailer or something like that, but if you're providing services, it can be really tricky to use Instagram and Facebook unless you're running ads, or, you know, if you're using it as a business. But generally, as a person, it's really hard because it's not a place where people are trying to network, or they're not in business mode a lot of the time. But LinkedIn is powerful because your secondary audience is also there. And that's why it makes it really powerful, because you can leverage both those audiences on LinkedIn. And if you're not sure of how to really define your persona, you know, your ideal audience or your customer or persona, you can use HubSpot's tool. There's a free tool that they have called Make My Persona, and it helps distinguish the different types of personas that you're dealing with. And there it is. And here I want to go over, you know, the strategies, as I mentioned earlier, that there's a lot of different strategies on LinkedIn. And you really want to be maximizing your impact and minimizing your effort as much as possible. So a lot of people don't know what to prioritize or what to really do. And so I want to start out by saying that, yes, like I mentioned, the killer profile, it's important to have a really, really good profile on LinkedIn, because it makes it easy for people to already understand who you are, what to hire you for, or what to do business with you in, how, you know, what action should they take. And it makes it a lot easier when you kind of accelerate them so they understand. And you have a meaningful conversation. You don't want to just, if you're not clear, then you might end up getting a lot of people that might spam you, or might not be clear what you do, and you might have a lot of conversations that don't go anywhere. But especially if you're a business owner, this is a really great opportunity for you to make it easy as a landing page in a way, without coming across as salesy, but really showing who you are and what you do, what you're an expert in. Establish that credibility beforehand. Also, creating epic content, like I said, really, really high impact. If you do it, it does take more work. Once you set up a killer profile, you don't have to change it that often, but content does take time to produce really good content, which we're going to dive into soon. There's also these engagement pods, which a lot of people are part of, you know, these WhatsApp groups, or groups where people share their posts with each other and they like and engage with each other's posts in order to drive up the engagement. Because if you do engage within the first 30 to 60 minutes of when something's posted, then it's going to get a lot more engagement. But the tricky part of that is ends up being a lot of work. And a lot of times it turns into a pod bubble where then people end up, you end up seeing everyone in your community and everyone in that engagement pods, everyone in the engagement groups posts, and you end up just liking and seeing each other. And then LinkedIn just thinks you're all part of this, you know, that you just genuinely like each other's stuff when it's not really organic. Another thing is to have really good calls to action. So you want to make it very clear and keep in mind, you know, what action do you want people to take? How are you being intentional when you're posting something? Are you putting something into, you know, into the comments? Are you trying to get people to take some kind of action? Another thing to think about is there's a lot of AI tools and bots and all kinds of stuff out there that can help drive. You know, there are ways to grow your following. There's ways to send messages automatically. There's all kinds of tools out there that people use, including a lot of the things that you might see as spam. But there's also ways to use a lot of the AI tools that's not spammy. And that's something that we're not going to cover today, but just something for you to know. So you really understand what's going on when you think someone is messaging you, but it might be a bot. And then another thing that has a lot of, I would say quite a bit of impact is Sales Navigator. Not everyone knows how to use it well, and that's where a lot of people fail. It does take work. So if you have a head of sales or you have someone on your team that can handle sales, and get them trained on Sales Navigator. It's a really great tool. A lot of people get a lot of business out of it because it just has a lot of automation in it and helps source leads. And it's just a great tool to, especially if you're business to business and you want to find the right person. You know, there's a lot of cool stuff with Sales Navigator. I don't want to go too deep into it, but it definitely has a strong ROI if you use it properly. And then, you know, the medium, I'd say one-on-one conversations, it's tricky because it's really hard to have a real conversation on LinkedIn when you're chatting, especially if you're doing business or talking to people in different time zones. Not everyone wants to talk on LinkedIn. Not everybody has the app. And so really, you know, trying to get people off LinkedIn, but get into a one-on-one conversation that can move off of LinkedIn is what you want to do. And then, you know, sharing other people's content, not really worth it unless you share something that went viral and maybe, but you have to, it's really tricky because LinkedIn generally wants people to write their own content. So it's really hard to get traction from sharing other people's content unless it is a really good post. It really depends. The algorithm's tricky to analyze. And then engaging on others' posts, a lot of people think that you know, just engaging in other people's posts will help a lot. It doesn't do much. And it used to do some stuff before when the algorithm was different. Now it doesn't do much for you. So I wouldn't waste time doing that. There's another thing I don't have in here, but in my course, I talk about writing articles. A lot of people write articles. It doesn't do much. That was very much 2015, 2016 doesn't do much. LinkedIn doesn't prioritize that anymore. So you don't get as much traction when you write articles anymore. And so today we're going to cover a lot on creating epic content, since that one has a high impact and it's a tricky one since there's not a lot of people that share how to do it successfully. So I'm actually taking a module right out of my course so you can actually experience that. And so there's 8 types of LinkedIn posts. There's, you know, posts that are resourceful, there's humble brag, there's educational, promotional, behind the scenes, trending, storytelling, and inspiring. And this is from my own experience after analyzing the entire couple of years I've been using LinkedIn and what has gotten the most traction. And the first one is being resourceful. So when the pandemic hit in the United States, unemployment rates started shooting up. And as an advocate for remote work, someone I've even worked for Upwork, I really spent time crowdsourcing and curating resources and free online courses. And I found a list of jobs that my colleague had shared. So it was like, you know, there's no shortage of information out there, but there's never enough sharing of information. So I was like, instead of reinventing the wheel, let me compile a list that my colleague had shared. And he also said share it widely. So I was like, okay, I'll acknowledge him by tagging him in his company, which is a great way to collaborate and acknowledge other people. And it went pretty viral. A lot of people were really, really grateful for sharing that information. So, you know, really trying to crowdsource and curate information can go a long way. A humble brag is another way that you can, you know, just doing it in a graceful way, of course, because you see a lot of people trying to promote themselves and trying to share, oh, it was an honor I was that person, you know, like it was an honor to speak at this event. It was an honor to speak at that event. And I was doing that a few years ago because I saw that people were doing that. And I realized that's not really, it wasn't really authentic. And it was kind of like, there's just too much of that already. Yeah, people are not so much on stage or out at events anymore. But ultimately, if you're doing it, I would say be very graceful about it and try to share instead of just make it about you, make it about how you can give value to your community. So for me, when I did a keynote, this was actually my last keynote in Orlando in February. I was like, instead of just saying it was an honor to speak at this event in Orlando, I was like, how can I actually share some of the, I actually went into my PowerPoint and I took out some of the lessons, I took out some of the content from it, and I was like, let me actually share, some of what I shared in the keynote. Let me actually give value to the community instead of just talking about my keynote in Orlando. So that went a really long way. Also just using really good graphics, or images, as you see here, they're professional photos, and it went pretty viral as we had, I think, 324 likes and it got over 30,000 views. Educational is another type of post. So you want to share concrete lessons. Here you can see it's actually a picture. It's with the same microphone I'm using right now. It was actually in Djibouti at the UNHCR refugee camp. I was doing some work there. As I mentioned, I do a lot of work with Africa, and so really trying to share a bit of just share value. Just sharing what is storytelling and what about storytelling. And I was just inspired to test some of the content in my book and to really just share something that came to me. Sometimes you get these ideas in the middle of the night, you're like, let me take some notes or record an audio note. When I try really hard to write a post, it can take a lot out of me. So I find that sometimes I get ideas at random. I just get some random ideas that I want to share or random thoughts I want to share. And so yeah, I'd say that, just being really, really, just being really educational sometimes in some of your posts to really teach people something that can go a long way as well. Promotional, so this should be only like 10 or 20% of the time. You don't want to do it too much because you don't want to come across as salesy. Remember that it's about giving value. So when the pandemic hit, we were doing a lot of design thinking work previously. And I was like, you know what, because we're not doing design thinking workshops in person, let's actually take our tools and virtually optimize them and have virtual sticky notes, virtual tools. Let's actually share this design thinking toolkit virtually to businesses, because a lot of businesses were needing to pivot. And so that was really powerful because people were really happy to get that value, and it ended up converting into a lot of leads, and a lot of people got exposed to that content, and a lot of those organizations ended up, hiring us for other things. But it was really cool to see, how people were really, really happy about just democratizing that information. So yes, it was promotional because yes, we were getting people to come to our email list, but we were also giving them a lot of value. And so that's another thing that you can do on LinkedIn is how do you actually build your email list in some ways as well by giving value? Since ultimately, what if LinkedIn one day is gone, or you move to, we don't know what the world's going to look like, but how do you actually remain in touch with people in your LinkedIn community? Another type of post is behind the scenes. And this is where it's important to be really authentic and show up. So when I was in Greece, it was about a year ago, I was in Greece and I was working on my book, and I was like, this is the type of post I would typically share on maybe Instagram or maybe Facebook, but I was like, let me try sharing this on LinkedIn. It's not me and, speaking engagement. It's not me at work, or it's me, just sitting at my Airbnb in Greece, in Corfu, and writing my book with my grapes. And I was like, okay, it was just a very candid photo that my friend took, and she was like, why don't you share it on LinkedIn? And I was like, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like a LinkedIn type of thing. But it was interesting how people really, really engaged with it, because it was first of all, it was a photo. And second of all, it was, it's beautiful, it's Greece, and it's different. But ultimately it was the content that was really authentic, because I was talking about how hard it is to be an author and how hard it was in my writer's block and what I went through as an author. And so just showing some vulnerability and leaning in can go a really long way. Another type of post is the trending type of post. And so this is, where it's important to stay on top of the news and the media and share what's going on, to be sensitive. So when the whole BLM thing happened, I was like, okay, let me say something, but I didn't really know what to say, but I wanted to express something. So I was like, let me just share something. And so this is an example of, sharing something in the news. Right now, we might see some stuff on what's going on here in the US with voting and other things, but just being on top of the news and sharing some current events, whatever interests you. LinkedIn is, in a way, the newsfeed is in a way a way to share news and what's going on in the world. So, and your take on it is interesting. So that's another thing you could share. I don't do it a lot, but I try to do it once in a while. And then there's the storytelling post. This is my favorite type of post personally. And just having lived around the world and searched for home for several years, it was really interesting to actually share that, my experience of not being able to get a job when I was living in Southern Italy, during the last crisis, and I had to learn to speak Italian, and it was during the Euro crisis, and I was really scared to show up and to talk about my failures and stuff. And I was like, you know what, let me just tell them my story. And it was interesting how it got so much traction, because I was not used to sharing that much of myself. And I realized the more that I tell my story, that was how people responded positively to that. And it got 237 likes, as you see, and a lot of engagement. And a lot of people actually that didn't even like it, they came up to me later and messaged me saying, hey, I really, really love what you shared. And they really connected with that and wanted to continue the conversation. So my point is that, you know, just leaning in, showing up, storytelling can go a long way. For me, I learned that storytelling was, I guess, one of my superpowers. And I was like, that actually made, and posting more on storytelling and actually sharing more of my story made me realize that I should focus more on personal story in my own book. And so it was also a great way to test a lot of the content that I put into my book. And the last type of post is inspiring and being shareable. So I actually interviewed Arianna Huffington a few weeks ago at the conference that I was chairing. And it was interesting because I was like, how do I actually share some of the, maybe share a snippet? So Christian actually created this video here, a snippet from the interview with her, with the fireside chat, and actually shared some of her tips. And I was like, how can I actually share something without giving away the whole talk, but how can I share some of the best tips from Arianna Huffington? Because she talked about micro steps and all kinds of great tips. And so it was interesting how it just went viral. You know, people were sharing it. People were like, wow, this is amazing. And it got tons of views. So that's another way to really get out there, is to be inspiring, to be shareable, essentially, that would be valuable to other people. And what makes an epic post? We're going to talk more about what actually goes into making a really good post. So this is a framework that I developed. It's also in my book, but it's essentially a framework that I developed to give a TEDx talk after several months of failure. For those of you who've done a TEDx talk before, you know how much work goes into developing an idea. And in fact, I even created a whole course on how to get a TEDx with my formula for those of you who are interested, because it was just a lot of work to figure out how to get a TEDx, which ended up becoming my book title, Innovation Starts with I. But essentially, this framework, you know, it was interesting because I was trying to figure out, this is how you come up with a good topic or a good idea for a TEDx talk. But I realized it was also a really great way for people to, including myself, to come up with what to share on LinkedIn. And so if you're trying to create, especially if you're trying to come across as a thought leader, or you're trying to establish credibility or your expertise, it's a really great way to come up with, is what I'm going to share non-obvious, or is it something that stands out? Is it something that's concrete and tangible for people to digest and explain to other people? Is it useful? Is it actually practical? Can people actually take action from it? And then is it timely? Is it relevant to what's going on right now? And so coming up with an idea for a post using this framework might be helpful, just so that you actually post something intentionally. And what actually makes an epic post? And so my formula, basically, I decided, this was my formula after failing several times at LinkedIn for years and not knowing what I was doing and just trying different things, trying to copy what other people were doing. And none of that was actually doing anything. And I didn't even know that there was the potential until I actually nailed a formula and I saw that there was a pattern. And it was when I have the hook. And so when there's a catchy statement or a question, remember that people don't have a lot of, their attention spans are very, very low, especially right now. It's hard to get people's attention. So having a catchy statement, a statistic, a quote, it's important to have something that will catch their attention in the first sentence. And that's why storytelling can be powerful, or sharing vulnerability, or sharing something that's intriguing. And then you want to have your message that matters. So what do you want to convey? And there's a way of posting, if you've noticed in the post that I shared with you, of spacing. So remember that if you're an academic or you're used to writing articles, it's not about, you have to not write paragraphs. You have to space it out in such a way that people can read it easily. So you have to think about, there's a whole basically UX for LinkedIn and how people actually read posts. And then you want to do research. So for me, because of purpose of time, it does take time to put together a good post. I try to use Google and I skim through 3 to 5 articles from credible publications to inspire me. I get inspired by reading other content. And so that will be the content that I include in the post after doing some research, and I come up with my own curation or my own ideas around it. And then having your call to action. So your call to action, what do you want people to do? Is it a question you want to engage them with? Do you want them to write comments? Do you want them to, and if you don't have a large audience, it can be tricky. You might not get people responding, but there are people that see, there are people that hear you. They just might not feel the courage to like or to comment. So that's another thing you should be aware of. but really inserting your call to action. And when you're doing the call to action, it's important if you're trying to take them off LinkedIn to another website, or you're trying to take them somewhere else, don't put your link into the actual post. That's something that the algorithm on LinkedIn will penalize, and your post probably won't go viral, or it probably won't get as much views as if you put it into the comments and tell people, hey, click in the comments, click at the link, click on the link in the comments to access whatever. And the other thing is to have, 3 to 5 hashtags. Some people go viral with that. They go nuts with hashtags. They put a lot of them. They think the more hashtags, the merrier and more attraction. That doesn't work like that. Actually, you might get penalized for putting too many hashtags. So, but what I would say that you can do that you won't get penalized for is tagging people or tagging organizations. So let's just say you're speaking at an event and you want to tag people, some of the other speakers or some of the panelists and their organizations. You want to thank people, acknowledge people can go a long way too. And that can help because then you sort of tap into it. The algorithm just works in such a way that it will get more views. And then reviewing the post track list before posting. We actually created a tool for that. And then what makes an epic post? So like I mentioned, long form storytelling posts where you're spacing it out. So don't write more than 1 or 2 sentences and then have a line of space and just do that throughout the post. You want to actually do research by going out, diverging a bit, and then coming back and deciding what you really want to boil your idea or boil your content down to. Using the framework, inserting high quality, high contrast media. So if you have really good photos or really good video, it's going to probably do better than if you have something that is blurry or low resolution. Uploading videos natively. So if you have the actual video, the MP4 or the MOV file, upload it directly instead of trying to take people to YouTube or somewhere else. LinkedIn will probably penalize you if you try to take people off of LinkedIn. And then putting external links in the comments, as I mentioned, acknowledging people and organizations, tagging them, as I mentioned, using 3 to 5 trending hashtags. If you like emojis and that's how you feel you express yourself and that's what makes you feel authentic, then go ahead and use emojis. It can be more visually, I guess, catchy in some ways in many of the posts that you might see. And then respond and engage authentically and insightfully. It's not just about the post. The post is a catalyst to building community and to doing much more. So you really want to actually take the time to respond to people, as much as you can, or if you have an assistant or someone that can help you with that, that can go a long way, just because you don't want to build up all this engagement and then people will remember if you don't respond to them. So just be mindful of that. And we actually have a cheat sheet of how to really, with this epic post framework. So Christian will be sharing the link with you if you want to, access that and download that. And posting at the right time. I know some of you might be interested in knowing when is the best time to post. So this was the best practice before the pandemic happened. Now, a lot of us are online all the time. There's not a lot of commuting to work and what was going on before. So now it's pretty much also depending on which time zone your audience is located in. So if you're in the US, then these are the best times to post. But like I said, it doesn't really matter as much anymore as it used to, especially because we're in this big blur of time right now. And it really, I would say generally posting between Monday and Thursday is best, but it really depends on where your audience is located and the time zone, etc. But I would say Monday to Thursday is when you get the most traction generally, especially between Tuesday and Thursday. And it's important to use a content calendar. So if you are, an entrepreneur, you're a content creator, just leveraging LinkedIn. If you post things on LinkedIn and you can actually repurpose that into your different social media platforms, that can go a long way too. So you don't put all this effort into putting this thing on LinkedIn. If it's relevant for your other social media platforms, if you're on Twitter or on Facebook or on Instagram and you're on other platforms and you want to share something on WhatsApp, you can always repurpose that. So just keep that in mind, that not everyone might see your stuff on LinkedIn, or you might not be connected to everyone on LinkedIn. So repurposing is really important. And it's all about the tools and the strategies and the systems and the integration. So LinkedIn is just a platform. You need to have systems in place. You need to be proactive. You can move people to other places such as a Facebook group. But ultimately, I think the goal is to get their email, especially if you're a business owner. So whether you capture their email through Calendly by a one-on-one conversation, or through a webinar registration, or a landing page, or a lead magnet, or email list, however you do it, remember that some people are more active on Twitter and other platforms. So exerting your influence where you'll likely get a response or a positive result is key. And so it's really about trying to take people off the platform into other ways to engage more meaningfully if they're not the type of person that's on their app and doing one-on-one conversations all the time. I wanted to share, we actually had a crowdfunding campaign for my book. We did it in August, and there was I think I was one of the first self-published authors to have a successful campaign. It was a lot of work, but I just wanted to say that LinkedIn was one of the main reasons for our success because of how LinkedIn basically markets you. And if you're strong and you have a good strategy, it can go a really, really long way. So with our LinkedIn strategies, we had tested a lot of different things and different types of messages and different types of content. And it just went a really, really long way. We were able to raise over $36,000 for my book and reach over almost 50 countries and got a bunch of sponsors and pre-sold over 1,000 books. And it was really, really powerful because of largely because of LinkedIn. A lot of the people that I don't even know or I never even met in person that had known me on LinkedIn for the past, few months or a year and a half or whatever amount of time they knew me, they knew me as this person on LinkedIn. And they liked following my content. And so generally, it's just really powerful to build that community because it can go a long way. It does take time and patience, but ultimately it's worth doing the work, especially if you're invested in building a personal brand presence online. If you are an entrepreneur or you are trying to increase your influence and impact, we do have a Facebook community and you're welcome to join. I think Christian can put the link in the chat. And we're gonna dive into Q&A really soon. I also wanted to say, if you do want that tool, you can get it at that link, the Epic Post Framework. That it's basically a cheat sheet to help you as you go about posting on LinkedIn. And there we go. If you do want to look at my book project, it is still on Indiegogo and you can still pre-order it, I think, for the next few weeks. And I have my email address in there as well, my website, and now I'll be taking Q&A. So thank you everyone for coming. And let's go to the first question. So here we have someone asking about, do you think that having genuine conversations means that we start being more personal on stories content? So stories is interesting. It's a very new feature and it just launched in the US. I know it launched in a few other countries earlier. I think that it depends on what your goal is. So you really want to be intentional. I think that, yes, you can be more, if you want to show up right now is a good time to do stories in the sense that it's still relatively new. And so there's not a lot of noise because a lot of people haven't started using it on LinkedIn yet. Because a lot of people that, a lot of people that do it on Facebook and Instagram aren't necessarily avid LinkedIn users. And a lot of people on LinkedIn may not be avid Instagram and Facebook users. It really depends what platform they prioritize. And so right now it's still a great time if you are trying to get attention on LinkedIn, then stories can be a great way. I personally don't use it too much because I don't have a lot of the time and I just find that I don't know if there's much return on that. I think that for me personally, for my strategy, I know that it's a lot about the one-on-one conversations. It's a lot about, I'd rather put that effort into a post and see how people respond to that and people can comment and stuff. I feel with the stories, you don't really get to, it's still a new feature. You don't actually get to, you get to share with people a bit about yourself. So I think that, yes, I probably would test it first and see what it does, but I ultimately don't think it's a good strategy alone. Like I think if it went along with other things or you want people to go to your profile in some way, then I think doing it intentionally can go a longer way. Or if you have a launch coming up, like a book or something coming out, then you can use stories more intentionally. But I don't think just sharing personal stuff, unless it really depends on your goal. Do you work with individuals? Do you work with companies? Are you B2C, B2B? It really depends on all those goals. And then someone else here asked emojis in the B2B environment, is that not more for Instagram or Facebook? So that's an interesting question, as we are we're in a special time where we have 5 different generations that are that are in the workforce. We do have the rise, especially of the Gen Zs and the millennials and a lot of folks that are using emojis more so than some of the other generations. And so it really depends on who your audience is. So if you're targeting, for example, a younger generation that connects more to emojis and connects to a certain type of content, then you want to speak in that language to them and understand, not what you want to share, but what would be of value to them and how it will be perceived to them. Yes, you should always be authentic. And so if it's not natural to you, or if it takes a little bit of a learning curve to learn it and then you start liking it, sure. But if it really doesn't feel authentic to you, then I wouldn't use that. But I do think that emojis, it really depends. It also depends on culture. It depends on so many factors. My theory is to always test and see how people respond. I think that sometimes emojis in messages can sometimes be portrayed. We've tested it before. We found that as much as we were trying to come across as friendly, it came across as a bit of, it could come across a bit spammy, or it could come across a different way. And so we didn't know, we figured maybe for LinkedIn, we would not use emojis so much in the messages, but it really depends on what kind of community that person's part of, or is it a pure, pure business, or what, it depends on the context. And so it really depends on the situation. I think that in posts though, if you do feel like it's something that is natural to you or authentic to you, then for sure try using it in the post. It does tend to get more traction because it shows up more, because it has that visual catchiness to it. Do you think that emojis are going to play a bigger role in the next LinkedIn algorithm update? And so that one's an interesting question. I don't know. I can't answer that one. Like I said, I don't know much about what's going to happen. We don't really know until those, I mean, you can look online. There's sometimes they share a lot of what will happen in the next LinkedIn update. But I would say that generally, if you are targeting, like I said, the generations or people that use or connect with emojis, then sure. But in terms of the algorithm, I do find that when I do use emojis, generally my posts fare better. And I think it's because they are more visually catchy. I'm not sure if it has anything to do with the algorithm, but I do notice that when I use emojis, my posts get more views. Another question here is, with LinkedIn, you can get over 5,000 views and less than 100 likes. Likes or other reactions seem so much harder on LinkedIn. Why is this the case? And does it change when you are more deliberate and regular? Develop a proper following. So the thing with that is that LinkedIn is interesting. Oftentimes people, with LinkedIn, it's interesting because you might see oftentimes the same post in your newsfeed multiple times, or it's not. It really depends on how big your network is. I would say that generally it depends. It depends on how much that post is going way outside of your sphere of influence. And it depends on many other factors, but I would say that happens a lot. Like, for example, that post that got over 30,000 views, or when I get posts that get over 30,000 views, usually they only get like 200 to 300 likes. And so you're only getting about 10% of people liking that compared to the views. And so that being said, I would say that don't worry so much. People are watching. There are a lot of people like myself. Just a couple of years ago, I was that person that would not put a like or comment because I didn't want that visibility, or I was very much behind the scenes, and I just wanted to kind of freeload and just read stuff and not really participate or engage. And so there's a lot of people that are like that. There are a lot of people that are also very just private, right? Like they don't want to engage, or they might not have the courage or the confidence to engage. There's a lot of people that reach out one-on-one and they're like, I've been following your stuff. Like for the crowdfunding, we were so surprised that so many people were following our content and they really supported the campaign, but we had no idea who they were. And it was very interesting how many people actually watch what you're doing and what you're saying. And they might love you, they might hate you. We don't know how they actually feel, but we do know that there are more people generally that are following you. And especially if you have the courage to show up, generally, especially if you're an author, you're a speaker, you're a content creator, generally you'll get a lot of people that are also very inspired by seeing someone else show up. And it can be really, really empowering for them, but they might not tell you anything, or they might not engage. And so that it's in a very interesting pattern that we find. I'd say that when you do develop a following, yes, the more people, as you grow your platform. So for example, let's just say like with the entrepreneurs we're working with right now, we're trying to bring them up a few thousand followers within the next few months. And so we're encouraging them, keep posting, because if you post consistently, then you're going to show up more in the newsfeed. And if you show up more in the newsfeed, people see that other people are engaging with your content. And as you grow your following and more people are engaging with your content, some of the people that were very quiet might feel like, okay, now I can like, because I'm not going to be the 1 out of 5 likes. I'm going to be like the 1 out of a few hundred likes, or 1 out of 100 likes. And so, yes, you'll notice that it just takes people some time to come out of their shells and start liking and engaging. Usually you'll get more likes than even engagement. Engagement's tricky. Engagement is a whole thing of its own. You really have to know how to ask powerful questions to your community. You have to know how to actually make it about them and not just about you. And I think LinkedIn has been very much about showing our own successes and not so much our failures, and not so much how do you actually have a genuine conversation through a post? How do you actually get people to collaborate and share in the comments? And so, and that's what LinkedIn is trying to move people to do, is have those conversations. Another question here is, how relevant is one's social selling index, the SSI? And that's interesting. I haven't done mine in a few months, but that is actually part of the course that we have, is we get people to do that. And I'd say that it's just a great way to sort of benchmark. Like for example, with the entrepreneurs we work with, we generally take a screenshot of where their following is at one point, and then at the end of the program, we see how much they've grown, or we kind of track it, monitor it throughout the program. Same with the social selling index. It's a great way to sort of just have a benchmark. And then as you work on your LinkedIn profile and you work on posting, and work on it's mostly like having a really, really good profile, and other factors as well. There's a bunch of different factors in that algorithm. It goes a long way. And I would just say that it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. You can have a very high SSI. It could be close to 100, whatever it is. But ultimately, it's about what is success for you? Is success for you building a community? Is it building your business, getting more leads? Is it about getting booked for speaking engagements or podcasts? Like what is the purpose? Is it for getting the next dream job? What is your purpose? And I think that's it. I think it's about defining what success means to you. I would say, like, for me, it was about building a platform around my book, but I don't know, like, I have no idea what I'm going to be doing like 6 months to a year from now. I'll probably be having a whole different purpose. I have no idea what it would be, but I would say that generally how you define success will probably change as we're constantly reinventing ourselves and growing. And I think that it's important to just understand what success means to you, and versus those things don't really matter at the end of the day, the statistics and the SSI, as much as what success means to you. Someone else asked here, what tool, database, software do you recommend to connect user registration data to use for mailings, etc.? So that one is interesting. I would say that one I can't really answer directly here. I would say that I can't make any recommendations, but what I can say is that there are different ways of extracting. So LinkedIn used to, until January 1st, 2019, LinkedIn had a way to export emails, people's emails from like all your LinkedIn contacts emails into a CSV file. On January 1st, 2019, they changed that for, I guess, privacy reasons or whatever. And so things changed and you can no longer do that. So people that did take advantage of that before 2019 accessed a whole email list. Now it's obviously harder. And so what you can do is, there's different ways to do that. What you can do is you can still export in your LinkedIn account. You can actually export the database of your contacts, and that's extremely valuable if you're trying to do, whether you're trying to do sales, depends on your goal. If you're a business owner and you're trying to, and you're trying to qualify your contacts, I'd say like Sales Navigator is a better tool to actually use AI to help with that process. But if you do need a full database, you can still download your full database of contacts. You just won't get the email addresses as part of that package. Someone asked, is there like, celebrate, support, love, insightful, curious? Is there anything else you would love to see? That's a great question. I think that LinkedIn is I honestly think LinkedIn is a bit behind in some of the ways that they engage. I think that a profile is not necessarily the best way to, and just posting. I think that there's a lot of improvements that we're going to see over the next few years. I think they're testing a lot of things and we're going to see some big changes. I'd say that the like, celebrate, support, love, insightful, curious, some of those are just, it's a big change from just likes. So I think that they caught up on that aspect compared to, I guess, like just similar to Facebook. But I think that there should be a way to not just put how you feel, but probably if there was a way to understand how you can actually like take things to the next level. Like, I think there should be a way to sort of, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, but I think if I really wanted to engage further with that person, how would I do that? Because it's just a button and then it doesn't really mean anything. And unless they're going to spend all their time analyzing who liked or loved or felt insightful or curious, ultimately it doesn't actually do that much. So I think if there was a way to have some sort of prompt or a button or a feature that help people understand, like, hey, like I want to take this to the next level, or I would love to engage further in some way other than just commenting, I think that there needs to be some sort of change. I don't know the solution yet, but I know that that's a big challenge, because sometimes you get really excited and you can only put like or love or whatever those options are. And I think it feels kind of boxed if you want to say something else. I think that's pretty much it. I know that we do have, I'll put this post post framework link again for those of you that do want it. I do see that if there are any more questions, I will stay around for a few more minutes. And I see some people are engaging in the chat, and thanks, Christian, for handling that. I suggest you all connect to each other. I think that it's really powerful to have this ASW community. I think that, there's a lot of us that are in other groups and we're trying to constantly figure out how to do business with each other or how to really help each other or collaborate with each other. I think it's really powerful to be connected, because it's a great way to see each other's content, to see what we're up to see each other's stories or whatever you want to share of your life or what you're all about. It's really powerful. Thank you everyone for attending, and I'll just hang out for a few more minutes in case anyone else has some questions. Someone is asking about the presentation and the recording. So yes, the recording will be available for you tomorrow. It's going to be posted on the event page and on the ASW YouTube channel within 24 hours. So thank you everyone for your great feedback. I see there's lots of positive feedback in the chat. I'll hang out for another couple minutes in case anyone has any burning questions. Someone is asking, does premium make sense? So that's an interesting question. I think I covered it very, very briefly earlier. So premium is, I mostly use it because with our strategy, it's important for us to be able to search, to have unlimited browsing when it comes to searching for profiles. And so I think that if you're a business owner and you're constantly using it to search profiles, or you're qualifying people, or you're just searching a lot, some people just spend a lot of time searching, or if you're recruiting, whatever it is, you'll probably find, compared to last year, compared to any time before, LinkedIn used to have unlimited searching. It used to have, you used to be able to search more. It's really tricky. It's, as a basic user, you don't get a lot of search in just the basic membership, or I guess, yeah, if you don't have premium, it's kind of tricky to do much searching. So I think for searching, I think it's really great for searching. If you want to use LinkedIn Learning, I don't generally use it myself. I know my team also doesn't use it very much, but LinkedIn Learning is a powerful platform for people that want to learn skills. There's all kinds of stuff on there once you're a premium member. I find that it's great for certain skills. If you want to learn certain things, you don't generally get a lot of content that does a very deep dive. And so I generally don't invest as much in LinkedIn Learning, but I know that a lot of people love LinkedIn Learning. I also think that with premium, it depends on which account you have. So if you're trying to get a new job or something, or you're trying to do networking, or trying to get recruited, or whatever it is, I think that the first level of premium, which is the cheapest one, and that's above the free one, I think that one is great if you're just trying to get recruited, or you're trying to do it for your job search. And then there's the other levels, like the business one, which is the one that I actually use. It's powerful because you can send in-mails if you want to. I also don't use a lot of in-mail. I feel like it doesn't actually do that much as it feels like it promises. So I don't find it that useful. It also can feel a bit spammy, because generally, when someone is sponsoring or paying for an in-mail, or they're using points towards it, that it's probably a marketing, or it's almost like we're kind of programmed that, okay, someone's going to spam us, someone's going to market to us. And so I think that ultimately premium is great if you are using it for searching. I think that there's other features. I think the most powerful one of premium it's one of the more expensive ones. It's Sales Navigator. So if you're a business owner and you're doing a lot of, whether B2B or B2C, Sales Navigator is amazing. It's amazing if you know how to use it well. It does take some, you might need to integrate it with some other AI tools, but Sales Navigator is pretty powerful if you know how to use it well. So that's all I would say on that. And yeah, ultimately you can do a free trial for like a month and see how you like it. I think that that's the best way to kind of test it out and see if you use it and see if it's worth your time. And that way you'll know whether you want to buy it or not. So yeah. All right. So we're having a few seconds left. So I'm going to end this. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'm glad that you all got a lot out of it. And I look forward to staying in touch with all of you. And hopefully when things open up, seeing some of you, meeting some of you in the world. So thank you so much for attending. And yeah, feel free to stay in touch with me on LinkedIn. Bye.